Okay, so King Lear. I have a few things to say by way of introduction. We're going to spend 3 nights on this play. And I'm going to do a lot of reading because my favorite way to teach Shakespeare is to read together and then talk about what's just been said and fit it into the larger picture. But I just want to give you a couple of things about the larger picture before we start doing that. So the first thing to say is that I've spent many hours, days, and years of my life teaching Hamlet. And I love Hamlet, and I think it's one of Shakespeare's very greatest plays. It needs a lot of time and attention because it's difficult for a modern audience to see what the backbone is. So I spent years writing an annotated Hamlet edition, which is now completed, and I'm looking for a publisher. So if anybody wants to do some publishing, let me know. But King Lear has a degree of profundity that goes even beyond Hamlet. And I'll talk more about this when we get to Edgar's great line, "Ripeness is all." Because there's the great line in Hamlet, "The readiness is all." And the difference between Hamlet and Lear is somehow implied in this relation between readiness and ripeness. One is a function of the will and one is not. So I'll talk more about that when we get there. But one of the most remarkable things about this play is that Shakespeare decides to set it in a pre-Christian world. He sets it in an ancient Britain before the conversion to Christianity. And the story could be told in any context, really. A king dividing his kingdom among his daughters. But he chooses to set it in this ancient world for a reason, or he picks the story for a reason. And I think what I'll try to argue as we go is that the reason is he is attempting to ask us the question or pose us the image of whether the Christian idea of reality is true. That is, does it correspond to reality, or is it just a story? Is it a myth? I'm not saying he was thinking in those terms. He was a Christian and he believed it. But he was, I think, making a case for the Christian view of things being fundamental to the structure of reality. So that the idea of expiation of sin, of repentance and healing that comes in the Christian message through Christ is shown in this play to be part and parcel of the structure of reality. And this brings me to why I have been trying to teach and argue about this play for so long, because when I was young, there was a professor at Santa Cruz who shall remain nameless, at a cocktail party behind me once, he was spouting off about this play, which he was teaching. And he was a very big doctor of English. Came from the East Coast, had a big following, brought 3 or 4 people with him. And he was saying how Cordelia is disgusting, a kind of namby-pamby, and he really thought that Shakespeare had made Goneril and Regan into the more interesting characters, and that Edmund was much more lively and interesting than Edgar, and better, actually, and that so on. So basically turning everything upside down, as is the 20th century typical wont. I was outraged by this, and I spent a long time studying the play in order to show how silly it was. And then a few years later, when I was still in graduate school, I saw the Peter Brook film production of King Lear. And in it, it was a bleak world, completely bleak world, and it was ugly and horrible and unredeemed and unredeemable. And he punctuated that by giving some horrible Edmund lines to Edgar and Edgar lines to Edmund. In other words, he reversed the characters on purpose to kind of take them down. And the production was meant to be thoroughly and completely bleak. So these images, this image and that conversation influenced me in not into believing them, but into kind of devoting myself to showing why they aren't true. And it may be now unnecessary because these guys are passé, and most people probably know they're not true. But nonetheless, King Lear still has the reputation, as John just said, of being the most tragic of the tragedies, the bleakest, the darkest, the most horrible. And I would like to try to get us to see that it is also, because of that, the most redemptive. And particularly valuable to those living after the horrors of the 20th century, as a reinforcement of our faith, if we have any, that ultimately there is redemption is part of reality, and the evils of the world can be redeemed. One of the techniques that Shakespeare uses in this play is the double plot. We've seen it a lot before in other Shakespeare plays. He has subplots and he has foils, and I last week pointed out that in great Shakespeare, every character is a foil for every other character. But in King Lear, he takes it to almost the nth degree, because he tells the same story twice. We've got a father and 3 daughters, and we've got a father and 2 sons. And so, and the daughters are 2 evil and 1 good, and the brothers are 1 evil and 1 good. And so you can almost say, well, why is he doing this twice? It's tell the story of King Lear. What do you need the whole Gloucester plot? It's the same thing. But it's not the same thing in the language. And what we discover in studying the play carefully is that the Gloucester plot is unfolding at a kind of external, political, practical, standard level of drama. And because it does that, because Shakespeare gives us the Gloucester plot in a very physical, visceral way, it allows him, through the metaphors and through the language, to take the King Lear plot into a higher realm, into a spiritual realm. So that you could say that the 2 sons of Gloucester and their rebellion, or their devotion and their rebellion, are unfolding at the emotional, political, interpersonal level. And in the Lear plot, the story of Lear is unfolding at a very profound psychological and spiritual level. And the reason we can get to that depth of spiritual journey in Lear is because he's already dealt with the kind of external journey of similar suffering in Gloucester. So that's a thesis I'm proposing, and we can, I'll point out how that happens as we go and how he reinforces it. And the last thing I want to say by way of introduction is I want you to keep paying attention to the word nothing. The whole play is set in motion, the drama is set in motion by Cordelia's word nothing. And there's a play on it there, and then the fool plays on it, and then the word keeps popping up and reappearing. And it comes to mean a lot more than it originally means at the beginning of the play. So I'll point out as we go what I see happening to that word and what's happening in the play by virtue of Shakespeare's use of the word as we read. But keep your eye open to that idea. Okay, questions about anything I've said so far? Yeah, the question is, prove it. Show me. All right, Act 1, Scene 1. I'm going to read a lot, and we'll stop and talk about things as they go. I thought the king, says Kent, I thought the king had more affected the Duke of Albany than Cornwall. what's going to happen? Who's going to turn out to be the good guy of these two, and who's going to turn out to be the bad guy? Albany's going to be the good guy, married to Goneril, and Cornwall's going to be the bad guy, married to Regan. And that the king was right to like or affect Albany more than Cornwall. Gloucester said it always seems so to us. So they both agree about this, Kent and Gloucester. But now in the division of the kingdom, boom. The audience is already on edge, right there. Why? The previous generation was the first which lived in some degree of peace, maybe you could say 2 generations, after 100 years of civil war in England. The Wars of the Roses were apparently endless and ongoing, and Shakespeare had written 8 plays about them by this point. And civil war in England was one of the great fears. Queen Elizabeth was constantly offing people through Walsingham that were threatening the peace and the stability of the realm. And they were being attacked. You know, they had Irish wars, and they had Scottish wars, and they had the Spanish Armada, and they had the French. So stability was one of the great values. And the idea of dividing the kingdom immediately meant bad news and war. So it always seems so to us, but now in the division of the kingdom, it appears not which of the dukes he values most. For equalities are so weighed that curiosity neither can make choice of either's moiety. They've been treated equally. Now, if he liked one more than the other, and now he's treating them equally, to us that sounds good. We're all brought up on equality. But Shakespeare's audience would think, well, if he liked this one more than this one, why did he make him the heir instead of treating them equally? Something's wrong. And then suddenly the topic changes. We've set up that idea, and now we've got 2 sons, Gloucester's 2 sons, and it's the same story. Is this not your son, my lord? His breeding, sir, hath been at my charge. I have so often blushed to acknowledge him that now I am brazed to it. Brazen, that is, I'm hardened. I cannot conceive you, setting up the joke. Sir, this young fellow's mother could. I cannot conceive you. I don't get what you're saying. His mother could conceive to me, this son. So she has this baby. Do you smell a fault? I cannot wish the fault undone, the issue of it being so proper. Edmund is a proper man. That means he looks good. He's built properly, you know, he's good looking, he's solid. And then Gloucester says, but I have a son, sir, by order of law, some year elder than this, Albany, Cornwall, in the mind, who yet is no dearer in my account. I like him the same. Though this knave came something saucily to the world before he was sent for, yet was his mother fair, there was good sport at his making, and the whoreson must be acknowledged. What was Gloucester guilty of when Edmund was born? Edgar is a year older and legitimate. Adultery. Lear's going to say this to him when he's in his madness. Remember Kent as my honorable friend. And then the king comes in. He sends Gloucester out. So this is interesting. In the movies that we just saw, Gloucester kind of sidles back in somehow. Not true. He's not in the scene. That is, he's out of the picture. Shakespeare's keeping them separate. The 2 divisions between among the children are kept parallel. And one isn't there to see what the other's doing in the moment for our benefit. So Lear says, meantime we shall express our darker purpose. Darker means secret, and it also means threatening, right? Suspicious. Give me the map there. Know that we have divided in 3 our kingdom, and 'tis our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age, conferring them on younger strengths, while we, unburdened, crawl toward death. Well, you think that, I mean, apart from dividing the kingdom, maybe that's reasonable. Our son of Cornwall and you are no less loving son of Albany. We have this hour a constant will to publish our daughter's several dowers, that future strife may be prevented now. Good luck. But we don't yet see that this is doomed. We can feel that it's probably not a good idea dividing the kingdom. The princes, France and Burgundy, great rivals in our youngest daughter's love, they're competing for Cordelia, long in our court have made their amorous sojourn, and here are to be answered. Tell me, my daughters, since now we will divest us both of rule, interest of territory, cares of state, divest us. Which of you shall we say doth love us most? That we our largest bounty may extend where nature doth with merit challenge. Which of you shall we say doth love us most? Would you ever say that to your children? Who loves me more? You, or you? Why do you say that if you say that? Why would you? What do you want to hear?
All of them to protest that they love you. Each of them protest that they love you.
He wants to be loved. He wants to be told that he's loved. Something's wrong. Now, some people think, oh, he's demented, he's losing it, he's too old, he's got... No. He's just... What?
Insecure.
He's the king. There's nothing insecure about him. He's perfectly secure in asking this question. He thinks he's going to get the answers he wants to hear. He is something. There's something wrong with him.
Because he wants this sycophantic kind of devotion.
But that isn't necessarily a sign of senility. If it's not a sign of senility, what's it a sign of?
Childishness?
Yes. Childishness, okay. Naivete. Vanity, for sure. Egotism. Well, we'll add to that list as we go. Goneril. Sir, I love you more than word can wield the matter. Dearer than eyesight, space, and liberty, beyond what can be valued, rich or rare. No less than life, with grace, health, beauty, honor, as much as child e'er loved or father found. A love that makes breath poor and speech unable, beyond all manner of so much I love you. Now, what are we to think? Do we believe her? Can we believe her? Of course not. We're sensible people. We're not like Lear, fools. Cordelia aside, what shall Cordelia speak? If this is the game, what am I to say? She answers herself, just love and be silent. I'll just love him and not tell him how much I'm loving. Then he divides the country. With this, I'm giving all this to you. What says our second daughter? Regan. I am made of that self-metal as my sister. Metal is a pun, usually in Shakespeare. It means what you're made of, and it also means M-E-T-A-L, metal. And these two girls are hard. They're hard as steel, as it turns out. I am made of that self-metal as my sister, and prize me at her worth. In my true heart, I find she names my very deed of love, only she comes too short. That I profess myself an enemy to all other joys, which the most precious square of sense possesses, and I find I am alone felicitate in your dear highness love. That's all I care about, nothing else. Not sight, not liberty, none of that. Just you. Cordelia. Then poor Cordelia. And yet not so, since I am sure my love's more ponderous than my tongue. I'm not a flatterer like these two. To thee and thine hereditary ever, then he gives the other half, or third. Now our joy, although our last and least, to whose young love the vines of France and milk of Burgundy strive to be interest, meaning intertwined with, engaged with. What can you say to draw a third more opulent than your sisters? Now he's already making distinction. So in the beginning, can't tell whether he likes Albany or Cornwall more, but I'm going to give her a little bit nicer chunk. And the question is, what can you say to draw a third more opulent than your sister? Speak. Cordelia. Nothing, my lord. What can you say to draw? I can't say anything. Nothing? Nothing. Nothing will come of nothing. This sends us all in the audience right straight back to the creation of the world. Since God created the world out of nothing, nothing will come of nothing. We can't create something out of nothing. We can only mold what we're given into something, something else.
It's a threat.
I'm sorry?
It's a threat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's a threat with this great history behind it, as if it were an absolute rule, which it is.
Because you said nothing, you're going to get.
Yeah, absolutely right. Nothing will come of nothing, speak again. Well, what did come of nothing is the whole created universe. So if God is doing it, something can come of nothing, but not if Lear is doing it, or we are doing it, or Cordelia. So now she does speak. Unhappy that I am, I cannot heave my heart into my mouth. I love your majesty according to my bond, no more nor less. Now, what does she mean by my bond? It's not like, she's had a written paper agreement with him.
It's a duty as a daughter.
That's right. The bond of nature. The bond of nature, the bond of love between one's kind, what one owes one's parent, and what she owes her king. So it's really two dimensions of bond, right? The subject to the king and the daughter to the father. How? How, Cordelia? Mend your speech a little, lest you may mar your fortunes. Notice the antitheses I pointed out last week. Mend, mar, with alliteration on M's, and speech and fortunes. So mend your speech, lest you may mar your fortunes. It sounds so good. It's such great poetry. And yet, he is descending into profound error. Now she speaks again. She's mending her speech. She's being more elaborate. Good my lord, you have begot me, bred me, loved me. I return those duties back as are right fit. Obey you, love you, and most honor you. Obedience, love, and honor. What else is he looking for? Why have my sisters husbands if they say they love you all? I mean, she could have ended there, but he's not buying it. But she doesn't end there because she's also pointing out that the sisters are lying. In this speech, she's telling the truth and they're not. Why have my sisters husbands if they say they love you all? Haply when I shall wed, that lord whose hand must take my plight shall carry half my love with him, half my care and duty. Sure, I shall never marry like my sisters to love my father all. You don't want that, do you, father? But goes thy heart with this? Aye, my good lord. So young and so untender, meaning unflattering to me. That's what he means by tender. So young, my lord, and true. He's blind. He's simply, but not physically blind, morally blind. So young, my lord, and true. Now he loses it. Now he loses his temper. Let it be so. Thy truth then be thy dower. Your honesty is what you're going to inherit. For by the sacred radiance of the sun, the mysteries of Hecate and the night, he's swearing by the goddess of the underworld and the moon and witches, by all because this is pre-Christian, he doesn't know any better about the divinity, but he's swearing by all the powers of nature, all the kind of ancient gods, by all the operation of the orbs from whom we do exist and cease to be. That is, we exist because of the sun and the moon. So there's a kind of unwitting idolatry going on here, right? Idol worship. Here I disclaim all my paternal care, propinquity, and property of blood, and as a stranger to my heart and me, hold thee from this forever. He's going against the bond of nature. He is breaking the bond of nature. The barbarous Scythian, or he that makes his generation messes to gorge his appetite, shall to my bosom be as well neighbored, pitied, and relieved as thou, my sometime daughter. I'll eat cannibals who eat their own children. I'll treat cannibals who eat their own children better than I will treat you. Kent interrupts. Good, my liege. Peace, Kent. Come not between the dragon and his wrath. I loved her most, and thought to set my rest on her kind nursery. Hence and avoid my sight, he says to her. So be my grave my peace, as here I give her father's heart from her. I'm taking my heart away from her, and I swear it as I would want to be peaceful in the grave. Call France, who stirs? Call Burgundy. Cornwall and Albany with my 2 daughters' dowers digest the third. Let pride, which she calls plainness, marry her. Okay, so who is the more accurate observer of these two people? Lear or Cordelia? Thank you. So when he accuses her of pride, that's not right. We don't believe him. I do invest you jointly with my power, preeminence, and all the large effects of troop with majesty. Ourself by monthly course, with reservation of 100 knights, by you to be sustained, shall our abode make with you by due turn. So far, so good. Only we shall retain the name and all the addition to a king. What does addition mean? We would use the word description, or accoutrements, or attributes. Yeah. So what does he mean by that? He wants to be treated like a king, but he's giving them all the power. This is creating a divorce, not just between him and his daughter, but between the two bodies of the king. Shakespeare believed that there were, and because it was doctrine of the time, two essences of any king. He was a person, a human being with a name and a genetic code, we would say, but he was also the embodiment of the state. He was both a person and the state. And those two bodies are one in the king. And that's why the king speaks in the royal plural. We are not amused. Who are we? I, myself, and I, me, myself, and I, the individual person, and I, the state of England, right? I, the embodiment of England. So ourself, he says, we shall retain the name and all the addition to a king. So this is impossible. To keep all that without the power, the sway, revenue, execution of the rest, beloved sons, be yours, which to confirm this coronet part between you. So there's a kind of sentimentality going on here. Part of the folly, part of the egotism is a kind of sentimentality. He pretends that if he just does X, Y, and Z, it'll all go the way he wants it to. Right? Do you see this? Kent says, that's not how it's going to go. I'm going to interrupt this. This is disastrous. Royal Lear, whom I have ever honored as my king, loved as my father, as my master followed, sounds like Cordelia's list, as my great patron, thought on in my prayers. He doesn't let him finish. The bow is bent and drawn, make from the shaft. That is, I've got the bow drawn. Better get out of the way, because I'm going to let it go if you're not careful. Let it fall, rather, though the fork invade the region of my heart. Go ahead, shoot me. Be Kent unmannerly when Lear is mad. He doesn't mean literally insane. He means doing something that an insane person would do. What wouldst thou do, old man? Ooh, that's shocking. To your king, your patron, your father, you call him an old man? But that's what he needs to say to get his attention. What wouldst thou do, old man? Thinkst thou that duty shall have dread to speak when power to flattery bows? To plainness honor's bound when majesty falls to folly. Just to give you a little window on the psychology of a devoted Shakespeare reader like me, I've spent several hours in the last 2 days trying to figure out why Shakespeare used the word dread, because it doesn't make any sense at first. He's talking about Cordelia. Do you think that her dutifulness would have the X to speak when power, you bow to flattery? If you're bowing to the flattery of the two daughters, why would she have any reason to speak? But why dread? Because dread is fear of him. So have fear of him to speak. That doesn't make any sense. So I looked up the word in every possible place I could find it glossed. Nobody answered the question. Nobody dealt with it. They think, oh, it's so obvious, we don't have to treat this word. I looked in the OED. There's no meaning of courage or the opposite of fearfulness. It only means fearfulness. Okay. So then I figured out that the second sentence, the next sentence, is an exact parallel to the first one, and that explained it. To plainness, honor is bound. That is, honor, Cordelia, is bound to be plain. And of course, under the implication, so am I. When majesty falls to folly. So what he means by dread, if you care about it even a tenth of much I spend time thinking about it, it means shall have the quality of dread of you that it would take, the quality of dread of her father the king that it would take to speak. And it's because it's exactly parallel to bound. So to plainness honors bound is parallel to duty shall have dread to speak. To speak would be plainness, and honor is duty, and dread is bound. Do you think she's bound to speak when majesty falls to folly, or when power to flattery bows? Those are also parallel. Power to flattery bows, majesty falls. Okay, this is the kind of thing that exercises me until I crack it, and then I can share it with you, and now we can go on. Reserve thy state, and in thy best consideration check this hideous rashness. Answer my life, my judgment. Thy youngest daughter does not love thee least, nor are those empty-hearted, meaning Cordelia, whose low sounds reverb no hollowness, okay? The sisters are talk, 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 and it's all hollow, and she's with these low sounds like nothing, my lord, but there's no hollowness there. Yeah?
Could it possibly be a printer thing?
I looked at the folio, and I looked at the quarto, and the quarto has no question mark punctuation, but the folio does. It has commas, but there's no accident in the word. It's dread, and it fit. When you realize that that's what he means, it's a great word because it's an inversion. It's an ostensible inversion with exactly the opposite way. Do you think that she would have the fearfulness to speak, but it's the kind of fearfulness of you to speak? Anyway, you can think about it, and you're welcome to argue with me if you think I have it wrong. Lear says, Kent, on thy life no more. That is, if you keep talking, I'm going to execute you. Kent, my life I never held but as a pawn to wage against thine enemies. Ne'er feared to lose it, thy safety being motive. That's such a great speech. Kent is one of my favorite characters in the world. Out of my sight! See better, Lear, and let me still remain the true blank, that is the, bullseye, of thine eye, the goal, the direction of your aim. Now by Apollo, king, thou swearest thy gods in vain. Oh, vassal miscreant, he grabs his sword and he's going to go slice him. And the two son-in-laws grab Lear and stop him. Dear sir, forbear. They don't grab Lear, but they stop him. Kent says, go ahead, kill thy physician. I'm trying to be your doctor here, and thy fee bestow upon the foul disease. Revoke thy gift, or whilst I can vent clamor from my throat, I'll tell thee thou dost evil. I'm not going to give up. You can't threaten me. I'm just going to keep talking because you're doing the wrong thing. Cordelia's right. The sisters are flatterers, and you're making a terrible mistake. Lear says, hear me, recreant, on thine allegiance hear me. On thine allegiance hear me, bum, ba-bum. An empty foot and a half. Why? Because Kent falls silent. He doesn't answer him now. Why? What's Kent all about? Allegiance. Allegiance. Loyalty. So he keeps interrupting him. He keeps saying no, 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 until on thine allegiance, boom. He's quiet. That thou hast sought to make us break our vows which we durst never yet, and with strained pride to come betwixt our sentence and our power. Now, who's come between his sentence and his power, really? What? Himself. Absolutely. Which nor our nature nor our place can bear. Well, that's going to be true. You cannot separate yourself from your power and bear it, and you're going to be ruined because of it. Our potency made good, take thy reward. And then he banishes him. By Jupiter, this shall not be revoked. Kent, fare thee well, king, sith thus thou wilt appear, freedom lives hence, and banishment is here. He says to Cordelia, the gods to their dear shelter take thee, maid, that justly thinkst, and hast most rightly said. So we've got these two authorities reinforcing each other. If we had any doubt that Cordelia was in the right, Kent's reinforcement of it convinces us that she is. And then he says to the sisters, in your large speeches may your deeds approve. That is, do what you promised. That good effects may spring from words of love, merely words. Thus Kent, O princes, bids you all adieu. He'll shape his old course in a country new. Out he goes. In come France and Burgundy. What do you want for a dowry? Burgundy says, well, just whatever you promised. And Lear says, right, noble Burgundy, when she was dear to us, we did hold her so. But now, as Olivier said, her price is fallen. Now her price is fallen. And it is probably one syllable because of the meter, but now her price is fallen, so there she stands. If aught within that little seeming substance, or all of it with our displeasure pieced, filled out with our displeasure, and nothing more, there's that word, nothing more, may fitly like your grace, she's there and she's yours, I know no answer. Will you take her or leave her? I can't agree to this thing. Then leave her, sir, for by the power that made me, I tell you all her wealth. Then he says to France, for you, great king, I would not from your love make such a strait to match you where I hate. Therefore beseech you to avert your liking a more worthier way than on a wretch, whom nature is ashamed almost to acknowledge hers. Now, how can I put this? Nature is ashamed to acknowledge Cordelia to be hers. That's how unnatural Cordelia is. So the question is, who's really being unnatural?
He is.
Clearly he is.
And the sisters, they're both.
Well, they're definitely. But the point he's making is, nature is ashamed to acknowledge her because he is, for his cuckoo reasons. And therefore he's identifying himself with nature itself. And he's going to go into this worship of himself until the center of the play, until that horrible storm in the middle of the play. And then things will start to change, as we'll see. France says, "This is most strange that she whom even but now was your best object," etc. She must have done some horrible thing. Cordelia begs him to say that she didn't do anything horrible. "Make known it is no vicious blot, murder, or foulness, no unchaste action or dishonored step that hath deprived me of your grace and favor, but even for want of that for which I am richer, a still soliciting eye, and such a tongue that I am glad I have not, though not to have it hath lost me in your liking." Just tell him that it's because I haven't flattered the way my sisters did. And that's why you're mad at me. And he says, "Better thou hadst not been born than not to have pleased me better." What does it take for a father to say that to a kid? Well, he's been injured because he imagined that she was going to be taking care of him, that she loved him, that he loved her, that she was the favorite daughter. And she's not playing the game. And she's not playing the game because it's a disastrous game. But he's crushed by it. Or not crushed, let's say, but wounded. France doesn't listen to what Lear said. He listens to what Cordelia said. "Is it but this? A tardiness in nature which often leaves the history unspoken that it intends to do? She just didn't say it, but is that all it is? My lord of Burgundy, what say you to the lady? Love's not love when it is mingled with regards that stands aloof from the entire point. You don't really love her if it's just the dowry you care about. Will you have her? She is herself a dowry." Burgundy, "Just give me what you promised and I'll take her." "Nothing," says Lear. "I have sworn. I am firm." There's that word. "I'm sorry you have so lost a father you must lose a husband." She says, "Peace be with Burgundy, since the respects of fortune are his love. I shall not be his wife." Now, one of the great moments in all of literature and drama, France, our hero, says, "Fairest Cordelia, that art most rich being poor, most choice forsaken, and most loved despised," all those antitheses, "thee and thy virtues here I seize upon. Be it lawful, I take up what's cast away." And then he goes into rhymed couplets for this public declaration of betrothal. "Gods, 'tis strange that from their coldest neglect," because they've neglected Cordelia, she's down in her luck, "my love should kindle to inflamed respect. Thy dowerless daughter, king, thrown to my chance, is queen of us, of ours, and our fair France. Not all the dukes of waterish Burgundy can buy this unprized precious maid of me. Bid them farewell, Cordelia, though unkind. Thou losest here a better where to find." And then Lear says, "Thou hast her, France. Let her be thine. For we have no such daughter, nor shall ever see that face of hers again. Therefore be gone, without our grace, our love, our benison." Come, noble Burgundy goes out with the wrong guy. Okay, so what happened to the rhyme couplets? This is a formal moment. It's a betrothal. He declares, "I'm going to take her as my wife," and Lear has to declare, "She's yours." Like, that's the deal. It has to come from both sides. And it sounds like the orderliness and the formality is exploded, right? But it isn't. It's half there. "Thou hast her, France, let her be thine, for we have no such daughter, nor shall ever see that face of hers again, therefore be gone, without our grace, our love, our benison. But that's not what it sounds like when he's saying it. It's there, but it isn't there. So when France is saying in rhyme couplets, I love this girl, I'm glad she's going to be my wife, it's all very formal, rhymed, balanced, harmonious. And when Lear says, she's yours, it's chaotic. He's fighting against those rhymed couplets. And this is, in poetry, an incarnation, an embodiment of the division in his mind, of the division within him. The outwardly formal rhymed couplets are that he's still a king, and he's still giving this official permission. Yes, she's yours, take her. But the inner man is in chaos. The psyche is succumbing to this horrible self-image of himself, this real folly that's going to be destructive. And the war between what's going on in his mind, this rejection of his daughter and hatred, which really is self-destructive, is in conflict with the external form of the rhyme couplet. And Shakespeare is able to use enjambments and this near rhyme to punctuate that, particularly in contrast with France's perfectly balanced rhyme couplets. Okay. This was a great insight of one of my professors at Brandeis, Alan Levitan. He should get credit. So Cordelia says, France has bid farewell to your sisters. The jewels of our father with washed eyes Cordelia leaves you. I know you what you are. And like a sister am most loath to call your faults as they are named. She's still behaving herself as a kind person, even to her horrible sisters. They aren't fully as horrible as they're about to be, of course. Love well our Father, to your professed bosoms I commit him. But yet, alas, stood I within his grace, I would prefer him to a better place. I don't trust your professed bosoms. Prescribe not us our duty. Goneril, let your study be to content your Lord who hath received you at fortune's alms, you beggar. You have obedience scanted, and well are worth the want that you have wanted. You've scanted obedience. You haven't obeyed your father. What did he want you to do? He just wanted you to tell him all this flattery, and you didn't do it. We did it. We are obedient. She says, time shall unfold what plighted cunning hides. Who covers faults, at last with shame derides. Time is going to reveal who is who here. Don't you wish that were true? Just time, and it'll all be okay. It'll all be revealed. Well, she's half right. It's all going to be revealed, but it's not going to help her. Well, it will temporarily, and it will eternally. But the horror of the play is that it doesn't necessarily happen in our dimension of time.
Professed is an interesting word
Yes.
that he chose, because it's like saying, that's what you say, but it's only, I know it's only professed. I know
Correct.
it's not.
It's all words.
She quietly comes out saying, I know who you are.
That's right. And Kent has already set us up to believe her, because she, unlike they, reverbs no hollowness, right? They're reverberating hollowness. All right, so now the sisters begin. Everybody goes out. France leaves with Cordelia. Goneril. Now, what's the difference between Goneril and Regan? It's a good question, because it seems like they're two peas in a pod, yep. Sister, it is not little I have to say of what most nearly appertains to us both. I think our father will hence tonight. Regan, that's most certain, and with you, next month with us. You see how full of changes his age is. The observation we have made of it hath not been little. He always loved our sister most, and with what poor judgment he hath now cast her off appears too grossly. Even they can see it. 'Tis the infirmity of his age, yet he hath ever but slenderly known himself. This is a... If you spend your lifetime slenderly knowing yourself, you could end up in a big mess like King Lear at the end. Goneril, the best and soundest of his time hath been but rash. Then must we look from his age to receive not alone the imperfections of long ingraft condition, but therewithal the unruly waywardness that infirm and choleric years bring with them. Now, this begins to sound to me like the party line. Because why would Kent be so devoted to King Lear if he were only nothing but rash? If the best of his time has been but rash? Why would Cordelia be so devoted to her bond of love to him if he were nothing but rash? So they are now engaged in...
Retrospective falsification.
yeah, there you go. Perfect term. Retrospective falsification. And we weren't there, so we don't know how much, but clearly their interpretation of him is pretty radically different from Kent's and Cordelia's. Such unconstant starts that we like to have from him as this of Kent's banishment. There is further compliment of leave-taking between France and him. Pray you, let us hit together. If our father carry authority with such disposition as he bears, this last surrender of his will but offend us. It'll just, we aren't going to get what he's promising us, and so we better do something. We shall further think of it, says Regan, and Goneril, we must do something in the heat. Okay, so we have the benefit of knowing the rest of the play to see the difference between them. But right here, Shakespeare's already showing us the difference between them. What did Goneril say? I love you more than this, 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 this. Regan said, I love you just as much as my sister, only she comes too short. So Regan has no imagination of her own. She takes the cue from her sister, but she always feels like she has to go one step further. But she's very kind of practical. So I think our father will hence tonight, says Goneril, looking at the bigger picture, and Regan says, yes, this month with me, the next month with you. Or this month with you and the next with us. There with all the unruly waywardness that infirm and choleric years bring with him. She's speaking in general terms. And then she says, yeah, for example, look what he did to Kent. And then Goneril says, he's going to offend us if we don't get busy and deal with it. So Regan says, you're right, we better think of it more. And Goneril says, you're not getting the point, we have to do something. So she's the older sister, she's the real brains of the operation, and Regan is like, oh, that's a good idea, and let's go a little bit further. So when it comes to putting Kent in the stocks, somebody will say, he's going to be here till noon. Till noon, she says, till night and all night too. Like, oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to go even further. That's kind of her characteristic. Enter bastard, Edmund, solus, alone with the letter. Thou, nature, art my goddess. To thy law my services are bound. Wherefore should I stand in the plague of custom and permit the curiosity of nations to deprive me, for that I am some 12 or 14 moonshines lag of a brother? What's the antithesis here? Nature versus custom. In other words, bestial nature versus human nature. Because custom is a function of humankind, human nature, human relations. He is renouncing that dimension of reality in favor of mere physical nature. Why bastard? Wherefore base? When my dimensions are as well compact, my mind as generous, and my shape as true, as honest madam's issue. What's the difference between a legitimate son and an illegitimate one? Nothing. Why brand they us with base, with baseness, bastardy, base? Who, in the lusty stealth of nature, take more composition and fierce quality than doth within a dull, stale, tired bed go to the creating a whole tribe of fops. It's a great line. And anybody who's been married for any length of time recognizes there are moments when you feel that way. However, what he's saying is that marriage is irrelevant. That law, custom, nations are nothing compared to mere physical nature. Well then, legitimate Edgar, I must have your land. Our father's love is to the bastard Edmund as to the legitimate. That's true. He said it in the first scene. Fine word, legitimate. Well, my legitimate, if this letter speed and my invention thrive, Edmund the base shall top the legitimate. Okay, so let's say they're loved the same. Let's say they're equal. Let's say he doesn't care about one being older or born within wedlock instead of out of wedlock. What justifies his abuse and mistreatment of his brother? Is that natural? It's natural in a Hobbesian sense, right? War of all against all for power until death. It's not natural in the sense of family or kindness within a family. I grow, I prosper, now gods stand up for bastards. So Gloucester comes in, he wasn't there, he heard the news, now he's recognized what's happened. Kent banished thus, and France in choler parted, and the king gone tonight prescribed his power. This should have been turned off, I'm very sorry. Okay, that shouldn't do that again, sorry. Kent banished thus, and France in choler parted, France meaning the king of France. And the king gone tonight prescribed his power confined to exhibition, just show. All this done upon the gad, meaning like that. Edmund, how now, what news? He puts the letter away in a hurry, on purpose to be seen. And then they have this argument. What paper are you reading? Nothing, my lord. Ha! No? What needed then that terrible dispatch of it into your pocket? The quality of nothing hath not such need to hide itself. Let's see. If it be nothing, I shall not need spectacles. Okay, just remember. I mean, you're remembering because you've read the play. Spectacles, eyesight, insight, right? Blindness.
See better, Lear.
Sorry?
See better, Lear.
Yes. It's a letter from my brother. I've not all read. It's not fit for your overlooking. He's got this all planned. And so then he reads the letter, and Edmund has written it as if by Edgar. And it says, if our father would sleep till I waked him, you should enjoy half his revenue forever and live the beloved of your brother Edgar. Ha! Conspiracy? Sleep till I waked him, you should enjoy half his revenue. My son Edgar, had he a hand to write this, a heart and brain to breed it in? What's the answer? Of course not. Why doesn't he know that? What?
Because he's blind.
Right. Now, the difference here is that Lear was reacting directly to Cordelia. Right? He didn't like what she said. Here, it's once removed. It's all set up by Edmund. It was not brought me, my lord. There's the cunning of it. No, that's not the cunning of it. The cunning of it is in him lying to his father. And he pretends that he hopes his heart is not in it, etc. Has he never more sounded you in this business? Never, my lord, but I have heard him oft maintain it to be fit that sons at perfect age and fathers decline, the father should be as ward to the son, and the son manage his revenue. No, he never heard him say that. It's his own invention. It's not an idea that would ever occur to Edgar. His very opinion in the letter, abhorred villain, unnatural, detested. He's already condemning him without trial, without evidence, without giving him a chance to say anything. He's just buying it. just like Lear bought the flattery of the sisters. I'm going to let you hear him. He cannot be such a monster. Edmund, oh no, for sure, he's not a monster. To his father that so tenderly and entirely loves him. Yeah, right. If you really loved him. All right. Then Gloucester has this marvelous speech, and Edmund follows it. These late eclipses in the sun and moon portend no good to us. Though the wisdom of nature can reason it thus and thus, yet nature finds itself scourged by the sequent effects. Love cools, friendship falls off, brothers divide. In cities, mutinies. In countries, discord. In palaces, treason. And the bond cracked twixt son and father. This villain of mine comes under the prediction. There's son against father. And we say, yeah, right. One of your villains comes under the prediction, but which one? Edmund, not Edgar, right? So it's not that the prediction's false. It's that he doesn't see that it can't possibly be Edgar because of their character, because of the quality of the person. The king falls from bias of nature. There's father against child, yes. We have seen the best of our time. Machinations, hollowness, treachery, and all ruinous disorders follow us disquietly to our graves. Boy, oh boy, you don't even know how much. Find out this villain, Edmund, it shall lose thee nothing. And the noble and true-hearted Kent banished. His offense, honesty. 'Tis strange. Why is Gloucester in this state? Why does he jump to this conclusion that Edmund is constructing for him? Does it have anything to do with his own adultery?
But he believes that because the bastard son was not of the same class as he and his real wife are, that he cannot possibly be up to his real son.
That may be the reason.
Terrible mistake, but he believes it.
It may be the reason. He certainly believes it. We don't know why he believes it.
I think there's a tradition or custom that the royal are worth more than the non.
Oh, well, that's certainly. But why is he then jumping to believe him instead of go ask his son? He's not senile, but he's blind. But he's morally blind. But he's also practically blind. He thinks what he sees is the way things are, just as Lear does, at a different level. Now, Edmund says something that's great and half true. This is the excellent foppery, meaning folly, foolishness of the world, that when we are sick in fortune, often the surfeits of our own behavior, right? Edmund wouldn't exist if it weren't for Gloucester's misbehavior. We make guilty of our disasters the sun, the moon, and stars, as if we were villains on necessity, fools by heavenly compulsion, knaves, thieves, and treachers by spherical predominance, drunkards, liars, and adulterers by an enforced obedience of planetary influence, and all that we are evil in by a divine thrusting on, an admirable evasion of whoremaster man, to lay his goatish disposition on the charge of a star. Blame the star. My father compounded with my mother under the dragon's tail, and my nativity was under Ursa Major, so that it follows I am rough and lecherous. Pfft! I should have been that I am, had the maidenliest star in the firmament twinkled on my bastardizing. All right, so what's the irony here? He's making fun of Gloucester for blaming the stars for what people do immorally. Okay, fine. He's right. Don't blame the stars. Why? Why not blame the stars? What have we got besides the influence of the stars? And it's not that the stars don't have their influence. We have custom, law of nations. But we can only trust to those because we have what? Are we animals? We have a soul whose greatest gift is what? Free will. The free will. So he's blaming Gloucester for not taking responsibility for his behavior. But what's he doing? Well, he's taking responsibility for it, but he's misbehaving. He's choosing by his free will to be this villain. So is he any better than Gloucester? Well, Edgar comes in. And Edmund pretends to be thinking about astrology. I was thinking of a prediction I read the other day, what should follow these eclipses. Do you busy yourself with that, says Edgar? I promise you the effects he writes of succeed unhappily. Unnaturalness between child and father. He goes through the list again. Edgar says, how long have you been a sectary astronomical? How long have you been studying astrology? I mean, that doesn't sound like you. And then Edmund changes the subject. Dad hates you, he's angry, he's ready to kill you, you better stay hidden. And Edgar says, okay. And Edmund tells us why. A credulous father and a brother noble, whose nature is so far from doing harms that he suspects none, on whose foolish honesty my practices ride easy. I see the business. Let me, if not by birth, have lands by wit. All with me's meet that I can fashion fit. If I can make it work to my advantage, it's fine with me. I mean, he's really the embodiment of the modern villain.
Sounds like Iago almost, that kind of.
Yes. He is very like Iago. Iago's a little more mystically evil than Edmund. Edmund seems to be doing it for land and power. I mean, he almost becomes the next king of England later in the play. But he is justifying it. It's okay for me to do this. Not okay, it's not morally okay, but I don't care about morality. There is no morality. There's this nature. Now thou, nature, art my goddess. So he becomes the voice of lawlessness itself. Yeah.
So there's a doubling of sort of the misperceptions both by Lear and by Gloucester.
Correct.
So what's the intent of sort of doubling down on these two characters who have nobility but who are lost?
So,
Or sin.
do you mean Lear and Gloucester?
Yeah.
So what is it that's misleading Gloucester? The intentional plotting of his bastard son.
Right.
Goneril and Regan are not literal bastards. They're moral bastards. Edmund is a literal bastard. So just start from there and think about what kind of blindness are we talking about? And I think you'll see that the Gloucester kind of blindness is just that degree more external. In the middle of the play, I'll give a little away, Gloucester is blinded and Lear goes mad. So what's the relation of blindness or eyesight to intellect, right? One is more attached to the outside world and one is more internal. Just that degree more internal. Obviously, eyesight is very close to us, and rationality is even closer inside of us. So you could almost say that the blindness and the madness are the parallel consequences of the kind of moral stupidity of Gloucester here, who really committed a sin, like he committed adultery. That's why Edmund is there at all. And Lear, who has not committed any external sin at all, But a sin against what? The Holy Spirit? A sin against his daughter? An internal sin of insufficient love and excessive self-worship.
And so, France, also a king,
Yeah,
makes the noble choices. He can see the purity of Cordelia, where her father
Right.
can't.
correct.
So you create this sort of interesting foil between the two kings.
Absolutely. And it's really a foil, what?
Early.
Early, but it's over then. We never see him again, France. We hear that he puts up an army for Cordelia to go defend her father. So he stays good in the background. But Shakespeare doesn't make him an active character after that scene, because he's got his good characters in England. Who are they? Cordelia, Kent, and Edgar. And then, remember the servants of the two servants of Cornwall? One of them tries to stop him, and he dies for it, heroically, betrayed by Regan. But we'll get there.
One more question.
Yeah.
In the context of the time when Shakespeare is writing this,
Yes.
is he taking any particular risk in sort of this description of both the good king who's in France and the bad king, or the mad king who's in England?
I see what you mean. In other words, what's the implication for King James?
Yeah.
It's King James by now. I think he's, as he says in another place, keeps on the windy side of the law, because he sets it in ancient times, far back. And it is an old story, like it's an extant story. There's an old play called King Lear, L-E-I-R, that Shakespeare knew and kind of picked to rework. So it's not clearly, he's not getting into the danger that he did when he performed Richard II under Elizabeth, because Essex hired them to do the play and he didn't know it was going to be a rebellion the next day. He got in trouble for that, but they got away because they didn't mean it.
Are the two King Lear plays sharing similar themes, or are they entirely different other than that?
Well, it's the same basic story, the king dividing his kingdom and it goes bad. But it's a much earlier play. It's not like contemporary. It's previous generation. So it's lumpy. Yeah.
Did it end similar? I seem to remember reading something about a version of Lear that didn't end.
There's the Nahum Tate version in the 18th century. He makes Cordelia stay alive and marries Edgar. They thought it was too horrible to end the way it ends.
So
That was later. Yeah, that was later. Okay, so in 1:3, Goneril is telling Oswald to misbehave toward the king. I'd have it come to question. I want it to become an issue. I want to talk about it. If he doesn't like it, let him go to Regan's place, because she and I have talked and we're on the same page. Let his knights have colder looks among you. I would breed from hence occasions, and I shall that I may speak. I want to generate conflict so that I can speak my mind to him. By day and night he wrongs me. Every hour he flashes into one gross crime or other that sends us all at odds. Now again, some of the movies that I've just seen have the 100 Knights of Lear coming in rowdy and yelling and screaming and misbehaving, and it gives some justification to Goneril's claims, but there's nothing in the play about them being bad. And Lear says they're not. They're exemplary people. They're behaving themselves. So she's making this up. Probably. She's making this up with no... I mean, the fact that they exist bothers her. But I don't think they're behaving badly, and I think when directors suggest that they are, it's slanting it the wrong way. Enter Kent, disguised. If but as well I other accents borrow that can my speech diffuse, my good intent may carry through itself to that full issue for which I raised my likeness. Remember you went to hear a play? Well, who's this guy that comes on the stage without a beard? And we know that actors are doubling up all through the play, so who is he supposed to be? He immediately tells us, I'm going to talk differently. Wait, I'm starting out talking like Kent, but I'm going to pretend to talk differently. And I raised my likeness, so he shaved his beard off. And then he talks to himself, now banished Kent. No problem. We just say, oh, that's Kent. If thou canst serve where thou dost stand condemned, say, so may it come, thy master whom thou lovest shall find thee full of labors. So he gets in disguise to come back and serve Lear, consistent with his entire life's character. How now, what art thou? A man, sir. Only he's changed his accent, right? And he's lowered his class. So he's pretending to be a kind of country fellow. What dost thou profess? What wouldst thou with us? Notice the royal plural. I do profess to be no less than I seem, to serve him truly that will put me in trust, to love him that is honest, to converse with him that is wise and says little, to fear judgment, to fight when I cannot choose, and to eat no fish. The note says, a joke whose point has obviously been lost. Not to be Catholic and thus forbidden to eat meat on Fridays, to be meat eater only, to be manly, question mark, question mark, question mark. Nobody knows what the joke is. I think the joke is just that it's a contrast to all the other things, which are these grand moral categories of good behavior. And by the way, I'm not going to eat any fish. It makes him a person. What art thou? A very honest-hearted fellow and as poor as the king. Lear has a great line. If thou beest as poor for a subject as he is for a king, thou art poor enough. What wouldst thou? Service. Who wouldst thou serve? You. Dost thou know me, fellow? No, sir. But you have that in your countenance which I would fain call master. What's that? Authority. Just what he's thrown away. What services canst thou do? I can keep counsel, ride, run, deliver a plain message bluntly. So that's going to be the character that Kent takes on. A blunt, plain-speaking fellow. Why? Because of that whole scene we saw with Cordelia. It's what Lear needs more than anything, and nobody around him is being that. And the best of me is diligence. How old art thou? 48. Follow me, thou shalt serve me. If I like thee no worse after dinner, I will not part from thee yet. Then the steward ignores him. They call him back. He's not being treated very well. I have perceived the most faint neglect of late. Where's my fool? I have not seen him these 2 days. Since my young lady's going into France, sir, the fool hath much pined away. This might be because the boy that played, I don't think it's true. Some people say the boy that played Cordelia played the fool, but it's not true. The one who played the fool was the professional fool. But within the play, the fool and Cordelia are not both there at the same time. I don't know what's happening here, but... They're fixing a car. What?
There's a slight bit of ambiguity at the end when he says, my poor fool is hanged. Is he,
yeah, we have absolutely no evidence that he means the fool literally, but it's a kind of affectionate diminutive for a child. But you're right, it has that echo. And there is a parallelism between the fool and Cordelia. But there's even more going on with...
In terms of they're the only ones that speak the truth to him. And
yeah, and Kent. But there's more going on too, and in the sense of what the fool means in the play. So we'll come back to that. But you're right, you immediately think of the fool when he says it. Although he doesn't literally mean that. The fool wasn't hanged, it was Cordelia that was hanged. So literally he means Cordelia. All right. I have not seen him these 2 days. Since my lady's going to France, he hath much pined away. No more of that, I've noted it well. Don't talk about Cordelia going into, okay? I don't want to hear it. Oswald, who am I, sir? My lady's father. Chutzpah. What should he say? My lord the king. My lady's father, my lord's knave, you horse and dog, you slave, you cur. I am none of these, my lord, I beseech you pardon. He's contradicting the king. Do you bandy looks with me, you rascal? He hits him. I'll not be strucken, my lord. And Kent knocks him down. And then the fool appears. He thanks Kent, disguised as Caius. Might have been pronounced Keys. There's earnest of thy service. Enter the fool. Let me hire him too. Here's my coxcomb. That's the fool's cap. It also means head. How now, my pretty knave, how dost thou? Sirrah, you were best take my coxcomb, he says to Kent. Why, fool? Why, for taking one's part that's out of favor. Nay, and thou canst not smile as the wind sits, thou'lt catch cold shortly. You're going to be in trouble if you can't go with the flow of what's happening. It reminds me of people at school saying it is what it is. Everything's falling down, education's being destroyed, the genders are being defined out of existence, the kids are being corrupted, and you get, it is what it is. Well, I wasn't sitting as the wind, I wasn't smiling as the wind sits, so I caught cold. There, take my coxcomb. Why, this fellow, meaning Lear, has banished 2 on his daughters and did the 3rd a blessing against his will. Okay, funny, right? It's the opposite. We get that. But what's the underlying implication? How has he banished these 2 girls, Goneril and Regan? From what? He's given them power. He's divided the kingdom into their hands. How is he banishing them?
From their duties to him.
Yes, from reality, from kindness, from naturalness, from order, from law, from everything that kept them in check. And done Cordelia a blessing against his will. Because she's out of it. Like, she's okay with France. She doesn't have to live through this nonsense that's going on, this lawlessness. If thou follow him, thou must needs wear my coxcomb. You'll be a fool if you follow him. Of course he doesn't really mean it. How now, nuncle, would I had 2 coxcombs and 2 daughters? Why, my boy? If I gave them all my living, I'd keep my coxcombs myself. Meaning, I would be twice a fool if I gave my daughters all my living. There's mine, gives him his hat, his coxcomb. Beg another of thy daughters. Okay, you are a fool. Here, wear this one. You want to be twice a fool? Ask your daughters for another coxcomb. And Lear feels this as an accusation, in despite of the disguise. Take heed, Sarah, the whip. Fool, truth's a dog must to kennel. He must be whipped out when the lady Bratch may stand by the fire and stink. A pestilent gall to me. Not the fool, he doesn't mean that. He's adding up what's been going on. And the fool is digging at him, trying to uncover in his own mind what's really happening. Sirrah, I'll teach thee a speech. Do, mark it, nuncle. Have more than thou showest. Have more than thou showest. Speak less than thou knowest. Lend less than thou owest. Ride more than thou goest, meaning walk. Learn more than thou trowest. Learn more than you actually just believe or assume. Leave thy drink and thy whore, and keep in a door, and thou shalt have more than 2 tens to a score. How much is a score? 20. 2 tens. You're going to have more than 2 tens to a score. This isn't just about arithmetic. Kent says, very practically, this is nothing, fool. Okay, that means 2 things. More than 2 tens to a score is 0, and your song is nonsense. And the fool says, then 'tis like the breath of an unfeed lawyer. You gave me nothing for it. Can you make no use of nothing, nuncle? Why, no, boy, nothing can be made out of nothing. There's that nothing again. And not only the nothing, but nothing can be made out of nothing. Nothing will come of nothing. Speak again. Nothing can be made out of nothing. But the point of the question is, can you make no use of nothing? What does he mean? This is where it starts to get deep. What is the value of loss? What is the value of absence of something that you thought you had? Do you gain something by losing? What's the line? What profiteth a man if he gain the whole world but lose his soul? What if he loses the world in order to gain his soul? Does that profit him? Can you make no use of nothing, of loss, of absence, of Cordelia's absence, let's say? Why, no, boy, nothing can be made out of nothing. He's still holding to that. Fool, prithee tell him so much the rent of his land comes to. He will not believe a fool. He's made nothing of his own kingdom. A bitter fool. Dost thou know the difference, my boy, between a bitter fool and a sweet one? So the fool, what is a fool? In this play, he takes on a quality that doesn't exist in any other play. But we had a little taste of it from Feste. Remember that Feste was kind of the wise voice in Illyria, and he couldn't cure them himself, but he could needle them. And he's allowed to do that. He could prove Olivia a fool. And here, the fool can call the king boy, and he can call him a fool, and he can say, you should wear my coxcomb, etc. Why? Because he's, in principle, although he has to be afraid of the whip if he gets too close, in principle, he's allowed to speak the truth, because no one else dares to do it to the king. It's too scary. If he doesn't like what he hears, off with your head.
And the king doesn't know it's true.
And the king, well, let's say that at some level, he does, at the obvious level, he doesn't know it's true yet. At some level, Kent, Cordelia, the fool, are speaking to a man that's still there, that still, they think at least, maybe will wake up. Maybe we'll discover. What's going to get him to see it? Nothing.
Losing everything, nothing.
Losing everything, including his mind. That's the shocker. Dost thou know the difference, my boy, between a bitter fool and a sweet one? No, lad, teach me. That lord that counseled thee to give away thy land, come place him here by me. Do thou for him stand. I want you to stand in the place of the guy who told you to give away your land. The sweet and bitter fool will presently appear. The one in motley here, that's me, I'm the sweet fool, and you are the bitter fool, the other found out there. Dost thou call me fool, boy? All thy other titles thou hast given away. That thou wast born with. Pow. This is not altogether fool, my lord. Kent's finally getting that it's not just nothing, it's something. And the fool says, no, Faith, lords and great men will not let me. If I had a monopoly out, they would have part on it. In other words, they don't let me be the only fool in town. They are all trying to behave foolishly, too. And ladies, too, they will not let me have all the fool to myself. They'll be snatching. Nuncle, give me an egg, and I'll give thee 2 crowns. 2 crowns means 2 pieces of money, right? The fool doesn't have that kind of money. What 2 crowns shall they be? You don't have 2 crowns to your name. Why, after I've cut the egg in the middle and ate up the meat, the 2 crowns of the egg. When thou clovest thy crown in the middle and gavest away both parts, thou borest thine ass on thy back o'er the dirt. You carried your own donkey on your back over the dirt. Now, why would a person do that? What, normally the donkey carries you, yes? So why would a person carry a donkey? Would he? Not unless he were crazy. And that's what he's saying. It's backwards. It's foolish. You're letting the girls carry you instead of you carrying them. Thou hadst little wit in thy bald crown when thou gavest thy golden one away. If I speak like myself, meaning like a fool in this, let him be whipped that first finds it so. Fools, why? Because if you're saying this is foolish, then you're a villain. Because this is true what I'm telling you. Fools had ne'er less grace in a year, for wise men are grown foppish foolish, and know not how their wits to wear their manners are so apish. When were you wont to be so full of song, Sirrah? I have used it, nuncle, ere since thou madest thy daughters thy mothers. For when thou gavest them the rod, and putst down thine own breeches, then they for sudden joy did weep, and I for sorrow sung, that such a king should play Bo Peep and go the fools among. So should be so childish and become a fool. Prithee, nuncle, keep a schoolmaster that can teach thy fool to lie. I would fain learn to lie. And you lie, Sirrah? We'll have you whipped. The whole point of keeping you is to tell me the truth. I marvel what kin thou and thy daughters are. Thou, notice he speaks to him not in the formal, that, you, but informal, intimate, thou. They'll have me whipped for speaking true, thou'lt have me whipped for lying, and sometimes I'm whipped for holding my peace. I'd rather be any kind of thing than a fool, and yet I would not be thee, nuncle. Thou hast pared thy wit o' both sides and left nothing in the middle. Here comes one of the pairings. Goneril enters. Lear says, you're frowning too much lately. Fool says, thou wast a pretty fellow and thou hadst no need to care for her frowning. Now thou art an O without a figure. What's an O without a figure? What's an O with a figure? Put any figure in front of an O and what do? You multiply it, right? It becomes something. Like 1 in front of an O is 10, and 2 and 5 and 20 and whatever. But thou art an O without a figure. That is nothing. I am better than thou art now. I am a fool. Thou art nothing. Yea, forsooth, I will hold my tongue, since your face bids me, though you say nothing. Mum, mum. He that keeps nor crust nor crumb, weary of all, shall want some. You don't keep anything, you're going to want it. You're going to need it. He points to Lear, that's a shelled peas god. That's the shell of a pea pod. No peas left in it. So Goneril has at him. I'm not going to read all of this. Are you our daughter? Fool, may not an ass know when the cart draws the horse? Lear, line 220. Does any here know me? Because she's been insulting him. You know, your guys are awful and we can't keep this on and I'm going to take what I want if you don't give it and so on. Does any here know me? This is not Lear. Does Lear walk thus, speak thus? Where are his eyes? What's he doing? It's a kind of mummery show. It's an act. They're not treating me the way I'm used to being treated, and so I must not be me. This can't be me if my daughter's talking to me like this. He pinches himself. Ha, waking? 'Tis not so. Who is it that can tell me who I am? Well, he means that at a very superficial level. Isn't there anybody that recognizes that I'm the king? And the fool says, Lear's shadow. What is a shadow? It's nothing. It's not only not the person, it's not even the sun. S-U-N. I would learn that. He goes on. I would learn who can tell me who I am. For by the marks of sovereignty, knowledge, and reason, I should be false persuaded I had daughters. I thought I had some daughters. Which they will make an obedient father, says the fool. Your name, fair gentlewoman, he says to Goneril, pretending. Be then desired, she says at 241, by her that else will take the things she begs, a little to disquantity your train, and the remainders that shall still depend, to be such men as may besort your age, which know themselves and you. In other words, do what I'm telling you. Get rid of your men, or most of them. Keep some old ones around you if you want. Darkness and devils! Saddle my horses! Call my train together. Degenerate bastard, I'll not trouble thee, yet have I left a daughter. Sound familiar? Sort of the way he treated Cordelia? You strike my people, she says, and your disordered rabble make servants of their betters. Woe that too late repents. Oh, sir, are you come, he says to Albany. Is it your will? Speak, sir. He doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know what's been happening. Prepare my horses. Ingratitude, thou marble-hearted fiend! More hideous when thou showest thee in a child than the sea monster. Albany, pray, sir, be patient. What's going on? Detested kite, that's to her. Thou liest. My train are men of choice and rarest parts, that all particulars of duty know, and in the most exact regard support the worships of their name. O most small fault! How ugly didst thou in Cordelia show, which like an engine wrenched my frame of nature from the fixed place, drew from my heart all love and added to the gall. Oh, Lear, 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 beat at this gate that let thy folly in and thy dear judgment out. Go, go, my people. Okay, so this sounds promising, right? He says, I seem to have made some kind of mistake. Oh, small fault, how ugly didst thou in Cordelia show. But he's not there yet. What fault did she have? Zero, none. It wasn't just not a big fault, but a small fault. He still isn't getting it. Albany, my lord, I am guiltless as I am ignorant of what hath moved you. It may be so, my lord. Then he goes into a prayer. Now think back to Edmund. Thou nature art my goddess, remember? Here, nature, here, dear goddess, here, suspend thy purpose if thou didst intend to make this creature, meaning Goneril, fruitful. So he's calling on nature to become unnatural in his daughter because she's behaving unnaturally to him. Into her womb convey sterility. Dry up in her the organs of increase, and from her derogate body never spring a babe to honor her. Pretty intense curse. But then he says, if she must teem, that is, if she is going to get a child, I mean, not get a child, but conceive a child, create her child of spleen, that it may live and be a thwart, disnatured torment to her. In my family, it was this. Someday your children will do to you what you're doing to me. Only this is worse. Athwart disnatured torment is worse. Let it stamp wrinkles in her brow of youth, with cadent tears fret channels in her cheeks, turn all her mother's pains and benefits to laughter and contempt, that she may feel how sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless child. Okay, well, I mean, he's right about Goneril. Yeah. However, is he thinking about what Cordelia must have felt when he treated Cordelia like a thankless father? No. He's not. So it's all about him still. And it's not only about him, but it's about him calling on the natural world, the forces of the world, to corrupt themselves in order to punish his evil daughter for his sake. So who's in charge of the world, as far as he's concerned?
Gods.
What? Gods. No. He's calling on the gods to do his bidding. Right? I mean, it sounds like he's the gods. He makes it sound like that. But he's telling them what to do. And later on the heath, he's going to say, I'm not blaming you, but still, you're pretty bad to be treating me this way. Now, gods that we adore, whereof comes this? This is horrible. Albany's shocked. Never afflict yourself to know more of it, but let his disposition have that scope as dotage gives it. Lear has gone out, and he comes back. What, 50 of my followers at a clap within a fortnight? There's a hilarious stage joke, which I heard many times, but one time was from Jonathan McMurtry. Somebody comes, one of the actors comes in and makes a mistake and says, 50 of my followers with the clap? Now I've ruined that line for you. You'll never forget it. Within a fortnight. What's the matter, sir? I tell thee. Then he looks at her. Life and death, I am ashamed that thou hast power to shake my manhood thus, because he's crying. He's got tears. That these hot tears which break from me perforce should make thee worth them. Blasts and fogs upon thee. In other words, not only are you so awful, but it's doubly awful that you're making me weep bitter tears. The untented woundings of a father's curse pierce every sense about thee. Untented means unprobed, too deep to probe. You tent a wound with a piece of gauze to clean it out. Old fond eyes, beweep this cause again. I'll pluck ye out and cast ye with the waters that you lose to temper clay. Well, that's pretty much of a, what could we call it, a pre-echo? Yea, is it come to this? Ha! Let it be so. I have another daughter, who I am sure is kind and comfortable. Oh, you're sure? When she shall hear this of thee, with her nails she'll flay thy wolvish visage. Thou shalt find that I'll resume the shape which thou dost think I have cast off forever. Do we believe that? Is it likely? But he needs to think it. And then Goneril and Albany have a fight. And she sends Oswald off to tell Regan what's going on. He says, how far your eyes may pierce, I cannot tell, striving to better, oft we mar what's well. She says, nay then, if you want to fight, let's have a, and he says, okay. The event, meaning the outcome. We'll see what happens. All right, we'll do one more scene and then we'll finish Act 1. Lear. To Kent, go you before to Gloucester with these letters, acquaint my daughter no further with anything you know than comes from her demand out of the letter. If your diligence be not speedy, I shall be there before you. Kent says, I will not sleep till I have delivered your letter. And the fool says, if a man's brains were in his heels, were it not in danger of kibes? If your brains were in your feet, wouldn't you be likely to get chilblains in your brain? Yes. Then I prithee be merry, thy wit shall not go slipshod. You're not going to have to wear slippers in your wit because of chilblains, because there is no brains in going on this journey, right? This is a foolish journey. Shalt see thy other daughter will use thee kindly. Well, that says on the surface she's going to treat you properly like a daughter. But it can also mean treat you in the same kind as this daughter has. For though she's as like this as a crab's like an apple, meaning a crab is like a crab apple, a crab apple is like an apple, that's what I mean. Yet I can tell what I can tell. What canst tell, boy? She will taste as like this as a crab does to a crab. In other words, they may be different on the outside, but their taste is going to be the same. Thou canst tell why one's nose stands in the middle of one's face? No. Why do you keep one eyes of either side's nose? That what a man cannot smell out, he may spy into. I did her wrong. We know that he means Cordelia. Good. This is a good sign. It's not enough. Canst tell how an oyster makes his shell? No, nor I neither, but I can tell why a snail has a house. Why? Why, to put his head in, not to give it away to his daughters and leave his horns without a case. Horns. It's a joke. On cuckold's horns, on adultery. I will forget my nature. Really? Is this a prediction or a historian's comment? He already forgot his nature. I will forget my nature, so kind a father. Be my horses ready? Thy asses are gone about them. Cheap joke. The reason why the 7 stars are no more than 7 is pretty reason, because they are not 8. Yes, indeed, thou wouldst make a good fool. To take it again perforce. Monster ingratitude. If thou wert my fool, nuncle, I'd have thee beaten for being old before thy time. How's that? Thou shouldst not have been old till thou hadst been wise. Oh, let me not be mad, not mad, sweet heaven. Keep me in temper, I would not be mad. How now, are the horses ready? Ready, my lord, come, boy. And the fool says, she that's a maid now, and laughs at my departure. If you think this is funny, shall not be a maid long, unless things be cut shorter. That's a sexual innuendo. She's going to lose her virginity pretty quick if she's dumb enough to think that this is funny. This is not funny. Thou shouldst not have been old till thou hadst been wise, and then let me not be mad. So what's going on here? Lear is having half a conversation with the fool, and his mind is elsewhere. So you can follow one conversation. Ha, ha, ha. What canst tell? No. No. Why? But the other conversation is internal. I did her wrong. I will forget my nature, so kind a father. To take it again perforce, monster ingratitude. Oh, let me not be mad. He feels his mind going. Now why? Why is his mind going? What's the cause of this breakdown in his intellect? Because he is at war with himself. Because he will not know what he knows. And this is the cause of the war within us, all of us. We talked about sentimentality last week. We talked about pretending the world was going to go your way and having the cure be an invasion. In Lear, it's raised to the level of tragedy because it's so powerful, this denial of truth, of reality, of his own choices, that it breaks apart his mind. And that breaking apart, that nothing, that making nothing of his mind, is the only avenue by which he can be healed. And the fool is digging at him to make this happen. So that you could say that the fool, and this is back to your point before, the fool is in some sense the embodiment of Lear's own wisdom, who appears at the instant that Lear's mind is starting to go. He's starting to have this conflict between his picture of reality. It doesn't start until, it's initiated by Cordelia disappointing him, saying nothing. But he thinks he can have his way and the other daughters will love him and blah, blah, blah. Now Goneril is starting to misbehave and he's starting to get it. And this conflict he cannot bear. And out of this conflict appears the fool to be the voice of his wisdom, which is the only thing that can kind of reunite the parts of Lear. But it's going to be a long process, and the fool disappears when Lear is completely and totally mad, and then, in a sense, is reabsorbed into Lear by the time he wakes up, so that he regains, before it's too late, at the very end, his wisdom. And we'll see what that wisdom consists of when we get there. I'll take a couple minutes if you have questions for tonight, and we'll continue next week. We'll continue on Thursday. Let me remind you that we meet Thursday, and then we don't meet, is that right? We don't meet the following Tuesday because there's another meeting in here. The 23rd, we do not meet. And we will meet on Thursday, the 25th, and October 30th, Tuesday, and November 1st, Thursday. So we'll have 2 more classes on Lear and 2 on the Tempest. Questions? Burning or otherwise? Yeah.
You've talked before about hierarchy in that sense.
Yes.
In Shakespeare. So, what is Shakespeare trying to use this play to explicate with regard to hierarchy?
So there's a hierarchy in the external universe, and there's a hierarchy in the mind, right? Soul ought to govern intellect, which governs the body through the heart. It's a kind of Platonic idea. And the inversion of the hierarchy is always a disaster. So what we have is the apparent inversion of the hierarchy in Cordelia disobeying Lear, but she's only trying to obey his truer self. And she's disobeying his what shall we call it? His folly, his blindness, his egotism. But he is following that part of himself, the willfulness. And so then that gives Goneril and Regan power to govern their father. And in the Gloucester plot, Gloucester is valuing the words of his bastard younger son more than the love of his legitimate older son. And Edmund himself is overturning the hierarchy by trying to steal his brother's land. And he ends up, of course, betraying his father and getting him blinded and so on. So everything is topsy-turvy, but it's within, it's not only within the state, but it's within the mind. And Shakespeare then illustrates that or elaborates that by making it happen in the outer world. So we have this great storm happening. The storm is about to break in the next 2 scenes, or next scene. And as Lear's mind breaks apart, the storm breaks in the outer world. And then we have this kind of discussion of what's the relation between what's happening to Lear and what's happening in the natural world. So it's all there, but it's not just an inversion of hierarchy. It's an inversion of the entire bond of love that God infuses into the whole order of creation. And disorder, chaos, is the result. And then the question is, can you make no use of nothing? Can that chaos be redeemed? Or is there something redeeming in it, or in the experience of it? And that's what we'll talk about as we get further into the madness. All right, thank you for joining me in this journey.